For our final myth-busting assignment, we will be talking about psychiatric hospital admissions and crime increases during full moons. So this belief, also known as the lunar effect, suggests that when there is a full moon, people are more likely to act aggressively, emotionally, or unpredictably. It is a widely held belief that has existed for centuries and is still common today. Using our toolkit, we'll talk about some reasons why the myth is so widespread. So we'll start with kind of hard to see, but we'll be talking about selective perception and memory. So people tend to remember the times when unusual behavior happens during a full moon, but forget all the times when nothing happens. This creates the illusion that the full moon is causing these behaviors. I'm not going to write on the board again because it's kind of hard to see anyways. Future Andrew here. I thought writing on the board was super cool. I'm going to do it again. Misleading film and media portrayals. So that's a big thing. So movies, TV shows, and social media often connect full moons with strange or dangerous behavior. Because this idea is repeated so often, it becomes accepted as true even without scientific evidence. So I'll use as an example, like any werewolf movie, like having to do with a full moon or any sort of horror movie in general. It's like that's when like stuff happens in the film. So that's a big thing. So inferring causation from correlation is another big thing. So people assuming that if something unusual happens during a full moon, the moon must have caused it. However, just because two things happen at the same time does not mean one caused the other. Another part of the toolkit we'll use is the exaggeration of a kernel of truth. And so before modern lighting, full moons may have slightly affected sleep patterns, which could have influenced behavior. Over time, this small possibility was exaggerated into the belief that moon directly causes behavioral changes. The belief in the lunar effect is a myth because scientific research has consistently found no meaningful connection between full moons and human behavior. So researchers have examined over 100 studies on this topic, analyzing things such as crime rates, psychiatric hospital admissions, suicides, emergency room visits, and more. So and across these studies, there is no consistent evidence that the full moons are linked to increases in unusual behavior. So in cases where a relationship appeared to exist, it was explained by other factors. So for example, one study initially found more traffic accidents during full moons, but this was later explained by the fact that the full moons happen to occur more often on the weekends, when more people are out driving. Overall, scientists agree if there is a lunar effect, that it would be super small and essentially meaningless. So let's really quickly go through the logical fallacies and misunderstandings. So first, people believe that there's a connection between full moons and behavior even when none exist. This is one of the main reasons why the myth persists. And so second, we'll talk about there's confirmation bias. And so people focus on examples that support the myth and ignore those that do not, reinforcing their belief over time. And then we could talk about correlation versus causation. And this is people assume that because two events occur at the same time, one must cause the other, which is not necessarily true at all. Unusual or dramatic events during a full moon are easier to remember, making people believe they happen more often than they actually do.
All right, according to scientific research, this idea is not supported at all. Psychologists and researchers have studied the hospital records, crime rates, emergency calls, etc. during full moon, and there's zero increase. So it's most certainly a myth. The reason that people believe it is it's actually something I find really interesting called the illusory correlation, which means that we see a relationship between two things that aren't actually related. For like, if something was to happen during a full moon, you remember it. But if nothing happens, you just forget it. It's just another normal day. But the stuff that gets remembered, you think back to it every time something else happens. And it just kind of stacks to make you believe that stuff keeps happening during full moons. It's also influenced by confirmation bias because a lot of people do believe in this myth. And then when something does happen, or they see a story or some information that supports it, it just reinforces that idea. Uh,
Well, when people believe this myth, it can really shape how they view mental health. And like instead of viewing it as a behavior affected by stress, trauma, or like a medical issue, like some of it like puts blame on things we can't control. And this can really make up people like to avoid responsibility and keep them from like getting the help that they really need. It also adds to the stigma I feel like just around mental health or mental illness by making it like seem more like people are unpredictable or controlled by something that's supernatural. When talking about this myth, it can really also affect like society and public policy, of course. Like for example, say that there's a police or hospitals that might be getting ready for more problems or something during a full moon. Obviously, like just because it's a full moon doesn't mean that that has to go on, but the evidence doesn't really back it up in the first place. As a result, I kind of think that time, money, and resources might be wasted, and like the myth can also make people more afraid by supporting the idea that crime maybe goes up for no reason. Instead of focusing on like real life issues or like social economic problems, we really like should address. We kind of worry about the wrong things sometimes, which I feel like we should do better of just as a community or society. That's why overall I feel like it's important to challenge this myth just because by challenging it, it like helps people more think more critically about their decisions that they make or real evidence instead of stories or tradition. Obviously, because we have evidence behind something that kind of has more, I feel like, value to it than like just a story that you heard, like maybe a tradition that you have, at least in my opinion. And it also really helps reduce stigma around, like mental health, like I said earlier, and keeps policies grounded in reality. But overall, I feel like in the end, questioning myths like this leads to better understanding, smarter decisions made by individuals, and then also a more like informed society where we're all connected and together.
Personally, I have heard people say that full moons make people act crazy. In fact, my mother-in-law, she really believes in this stuff. Um, and I have heard stories of like our emergency rooms getting crazy and stuff like that. Um, I never really believed it, but now I do understand more that it is caused by that illusory effect. It connects to what we've learned in psychology, like I said, about the illusory correlation and confirmation bias. And it really shows how easy it is to believe something or to reinforce an idea that you already believe to be true, even when there's no scientific evidence, all the research points otherwise. So yeah, scientifically proven, certainly not true, but it is a very widespread myth that a lot of people do believe.